Thanks for your patience, everybody, as we're getting started with the first event for Nova Scotia Human Rights Week. My name is Jeff Overmars. I am a communications advisor at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, and I'll be introducing our panelists in a few moments. But first, I wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement. Today, we gather in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation, which is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship. Mi'kmaq have made this land their home from time immemorial, and they are its past, present, and future caretakers. Despite this, the pursuit of colonialism resulted in stolen lands, encroachment on sacred territories, cultural genocide, and oppression that served to advance the lives of settlers at the expense of all Elnu people. It is in the context of this history that the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission seeks to address persistent, systemic, and institutionalized discrimination resulting from the ideals of white supremacy. The Commission's origins are rooted in the work of African Nova Scotians who have been present in Mi'kma'ki for more than 400 years. Rooted in a history of slavery and legislated segregation, African Nova Scotians came together, coordinated, and fought against institutionalized racism, discrimination, and oppression, which led to the creation of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. As we build upon their work together to address the harms of colonialism, we do so in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, drawing upon the resilience and commitment of our forebears to guide us in our important work to protect and promote human rights in Nova Scotia. We recognize the intergenerational impacts of the historic and ongoing injustices against Mi'kmaq people and African Nova Scotians, and the resulting privileges of those who continue to benefit from these offenses.
Mm-hmm.
We honor and embrace Mi'kmaq wisdom, such as Imsit Nugama, meaning all my relations, which values the inherent interconnectivity of all things as we strive to foster relationships based on respect for one another's inherent dignity. I invite you to join in this work with humility and optimism for a better future. Nogama. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenters who will be presenting on the Child and Family Wellbeing, a new path forward for promoting safety and well-being of children, youth, and families in Nova Scotia. I appreciate the time that our colleagues in government have taken to put this presentation together, and I would like to introduce them briefly before handing the floor over to them. The presenters are Barb Estwick, Coordinator of Children in Care with the Department of Community Services, as well as Dawn Sherry, Coordinator of Child, Youth, and Family Services, and Ann Simmons, Director of Afrocentric Child and Family Wellbeing. I would like then to throw over to our presenters and thank them once again. I would ask that folks hold their questions or drop them into the Q&A box, and we'll address them as the presentation concludes. Thanks very much, presenters. Over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. We're very happy to be here today to have some conversation and share some information about what's happening in child and family well-being. So today we're going to be sharing some information on the shifting of approaches within child and family well-being. That actually is being built upon a new foundation, which is our practice framework. And I'm delighted to share information about the work that has resulted in the creation of this framework and what this means for children, youth, and families in Nova Scotia. I'm going to share a little bit about what the framework, the impact that the framework has on the redevelopment of our policy within child and family wellbeing. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ann Simmons, who is going to share information with you all regarding the Afrocentric Child and Family Wellbeing team. And then Barb will finish off our presentation today with a presentation information on the PATH program in Child and Family Wellbeing, which supports youth as they transition to adulthood. So the work that has been ongoing for the last 2.5 years has been about shifting the way we support children, youth, and families. Currently, our team members within Child and Family Wellbeing provide services to families through Child and Family Wellbeing policy that is quite extensive, quite detailed, and doesn't save for a lot of room to consider individual circumstances of families. This shift in approach for CFW referring to Child and Family Wellbeing, is about empowering our team members to be able to support and respond to the individual needs of the children, youth, and families that they support. This shift also is going to ensure that practice informs policy, as opposed to creating policy that will then inform practice. What this allows for is for our team members to consider creative options, those options and service provision that would be more aligned with what their unique circumstances and needs are, as opposed to applying a cookie cutter approach to every single family. Along with these changes, there is also significant shifts happening in terms of how we speak about the work that we do in child and family well-being. What was formerly known as child welfare carries with it a lot of negative connotations in terms of what that language means for some people. It doesn't really capture the essence of what well-being is. Quite often, when we hear the words child welfare, the thought or the perception goes towards focusing on that physical safety component. And while that is very important, there are other components that also need to be considered when we look at well-being from a holistic perspective. So looking at safety in terms of physical safety, but also emotional safety, psychological safety, where attachment comes in and impacts somebody's well-being, and how their relationships and connections also contribute to that. So shifting towards a more holistic perception or perspective of what well-being is ensures that those considerations are also being made. A shift towards child and family well-being as well gives strong consideration to where prevention and early intervention can be a support or assistance for a family, as opposed to taking a reactive approach when concerns or safety issues are raised. There is far more room for conversation and consideration as to where preventative measures may be of more assistance to a family or more supportive. And in that sense, where community can play a role in its supporting safety and well-being of children, youth, and families. So language matters, and how we speak about the work that we do impacts how we think about the work that we do. And how we think about the work that we do impacts how we do the work. So a change with language leads to a change overall to how we approach practice with children, youth, and families. So back in 2022, we began some significant work around building that foundation for child and family well-being. Prior to taking an examination of our current policies and redeveloping our current policies, there was a need to provide that foundation base for policies to be built upon. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, where policy informing or influencing practice does not necessarily leave room for all of those individual considerations, having a practice framework that gives space, that gives voice to those individuals who are in receipt of services, or who are being supported by children, youth, or child and family well-being certainly makes for a more collaborative approach to providing support. So the practice framework was the culmination of this work, beginning with an examination of what currently exists, both on a national and international level, to be able to draw inspiration and information from work that has already come before this. So a number of sources were considered as we started the initial process of developing a practice framework for child and family well-being in Nova Scotia, looking at frameworks that already exist, as well as pieces of work that certainly contribute to the building of our framework. And I want to pause here and say that within Nova Scotia, we do have a really strong branch of leading practice through our colleagues at Mi'kmaq Family and Children's Services, who have been practicing in this way for years. So the building of our practice framework really pulled from the fantastic work that Mi'kmaq Family and Children's Services are already doing. Through a number of engagement sessions that involved our internal team members through Child and Family Wellbeing, as well as our external partners in community and a number of organizations, the practice framework was developed over the course of 8 months. Through those engagements, we heard from approximately 500 individuals who were able to lend their voice to the creation of this framework. So from that, we were able to ensure that the circumstances and the voices of the families that are accessing child and family well-being support and services are highlighted and demonstrated throughout and heard throughout this framework. The purpose of the framework, which I will show you on the next couple of slides, the components of this framework, but this framework is really about defining what the overall vision for child and family well-being is, as well as the values that uphold it, and the guiding principles and standards of practice that inform the work of child and family well-being team members. This framework's intent is to achieve best outcomes for families. And we can't do that without acknowledging what those individual experiences have been and how those experiences are impacted by overlapping social identities and relationships within the community. Community plays a vital role in child and family well-being. The framework elevates and highlights pro-equity, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive principles. And this applies to our practices with children, youth, and families, but also with our practices with one another, across our department, across our divisions, as well as across government partners as well. This framework also guides the work of our community service providers who are supporting families within community on behalf of CFW. There is a strong focus, as I mentioned, on prevention and early intervention. And generating our policies from a person-centered, child, youth, family-centered lens. The framework is about affirming that families have inherent strengths to thrive and are best supported through healthy community relationships. And you will see as we share in particular, the vision statement of the practice framework, that safety and well-being is very much a shared responsibility within community. This is not a responsibility that is owned by one entity, by one service provider, by one government department, that there is a need to work outside of silos in order to promote what's best for safety and well-being for children, youth, and families. So as I mentioned, there are 4 components of our practice framework. The first one being the vision statement, which is viewed as the aspirational statement of child and family well-being in Nova Scotia. Ultimately, this is the outcome, the best outcome that we would work towards. The values are what provide the purpose and guidance. This is the why of why we are taking such an approach to supporting children, youth, and families. And this is what we stand for within Child and Family Wellbeing. The guiding principles provide the overall philosophy for child and family well-being and those considerations that come up when decision-making is occurring. And finally, the practice standards outline the how. This is about how we ensure that we are aligning our practice with the practice framework. It provides a high level of detail in terms of guidance for child and family well-being team members, as well as community service providers, and also built in a reflective practice throughout. Reflective practice is a key component to this work, and this is where our team members are challenged to look at their own personal impact, the role of personal biases and values, and how those can come into play in impact services for children, youth, and families. So our team members are really challenged to consider that and ask questions through every point of interaction when working with families. And finally, this is essentially our framework on a page. We have some far more detailed documents to go along with this, but this is capturing those four main components that I just mentioned on the previous slide. So as you can see, our vision statement really upholds that point of safety and well-being being a shared responsibility. Our vision is that communities support the safety and well-being of children, youth, and families. This vision statement is important because it's not saying that Department of Community Services or Child and Family Wellbeing is solely responsible, but it is a community effort, a community approach, and Child and Family Wellbeing is simply one member of that community. We know that the definition of family varies for families. The definition of community also varies for families. This is not simply the geographical area in which somebody lives, but rather those social identities that may be overlapping that are part of that person's life. So it's important to have a broad understanding of what community is and what family is for each individual child, youth, or family who is being supported through child and family well-being. Our framework identifies the values of honesty, dignity, and relationships, and that these are absolutely essential to being able to provide full, transparent support when working with children, youth, and families. We have 5 guiding principles that, again, look and help team members to be able to explore the circumstances of family from an individualized perspective, to not be considering an umbrella approach to being able to provide support and services. And finally, our practice standards, which, as I mentioned, there are 7 practice standards, but each one of these are built out quite extensively to build in that reflective practice piece to ensure that those considerations are happening at, again, all levels of connection with children, youth, and families. So from this framework, we have been actually for the last 2 years, we have been doing work on the child and family well-being policies. So as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, our policies currently are quite extensive, quite detailed, do not leave a lot of room for considering of what individual circumstances a family may be experiencing. And while services are not denied or not available if it's not fitting within a certain policy. There are additional barriers that come up when there is a need to seek an exception to policy. So this being an additional administrative task that ultimately results in delays for families who require a particular service that may not be encompassed within a policy as it currently exists. With our new CFW policy manual, we are taking a much different approach. These policies are going to be written from a human-centered perspective, so written with regard to children, youth, and families. It is not a linear approach to policy development. Whereas in our current policy manual, we may have policies specific to child safety and family preservation, what was formerly known as child protection, or policies related to foster care, and having them built essentially within their own silos in our own policy manual. The new manual will be looking at how each of these services can be, or rather, the connection points of children, youth, and families, which can occur at any point. So there could be a number of entry points to interactions with child and family well-being, and this new structure of policy is meant to illustrate that. So this manual will actually be organized so that the public would be able to access information if there are questions related to child and family well-being involvement. This could be a family who has been contacted by Child and Family Wellbeing because there has been a concern, or this could be individuals who are interested in becoming foster caregivers. Where might they look for that information within this manual? This manual will be public facing and accessible to the public to be able to obtain the information regarding child and family well-being, which is a significant shift from our current process where our manual is not publicly accessible and has to be accessed through a request to the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. So that is a very quick walkthrough of the practice framework and a bit of information on the shifts to our policy development within child and family well-being. I am going to turn it over to Anne Simmons now, who is going to share some information on the Afrocentric Child and Family Wellbeing team.
Thank you, Dawn. Can everybody hear me? I want to thank everyone for this opportunity, and certainly to be here in this space is certainly for me is a blessing. So as the director of the Afrocentric Child and Family Wellbeing team, this work started in August of 2022. And over the years, the Department of Community Services realized that there were gaps in serving people of African descent, particularly African Nova Scotians. So how do you fill that gap? So the department created the Afrocentric team. That team comprised of one person. It was me. I was asked to, the first task as being the director was asked, how do we have the conversation with staff around the Afrocentric perspective? And it realized that the department realized that needed to be a conversation where information could be pulled in terms of how do we set this team up. So it was Barb Eswick, who was on this call, and a BSW student, and along with myself, held a caseload, what we call a caseload review. And in that review, there were 91 social workers across the province had the conversation with. 5 were on Teams. And when I say had the conversation, those conversations were in person. And one of there were several questions asked in the caseload review. And the first question was about how many people of African descent or African Nova Scotian do you have on your caseload? The response to that was very minimum because people were not asking the question of race. Not that they didn't know how to ask the question, fear of what the response would be. So a part of that caseload review, Barb and I, we provided words for workers. So the response would be so that we could be culturally attentive and provide culturally responsive services. When Dawn alluded to the cookie cutter kind of approach, that's what we were getting. When a family or a youth came to the attention of the department, it was a cookie cutter approach. Everybody got the same kind of service. But the Afrocentric perspective allowed for the shift in that. And that shift was, the shift is that we need to know how we can best serve you, what's important to your family from an Afrocentric perspective, and how we can reach in so that we ensure that those services are helping you and your family and the youth. As Dawn alluded to earlier, that the practice framework is based on the Indigenous and certainly the Afrocentric perspective, where community and family are important. And that was noted in the caseload review. Workers were well aware that family of African descent and African Nova Scotian, they were strong, they're very supportive, and family and the community and their spiritual aspect was very strong in terms of keeping them moving forward or keeping us moving forward. So the team was created, and the role of the team is to provide the perspective. Now, in terms of service delivery, that would start from screening, where the first call come in, the assessment stage, which was known as the intake stage, but it's now the assessment stage, and ongoing support where services are put in. Once the call come in, the worker is to ask the question, how do you identify? And if the family or the youth said identify as African Nova Scotian or a person of African descent or Black, though that demographic detail is filled out so that whoever touched the file would know that this family, that of African descent, African Nova Scotian, or identifies Black. The worker, the supervisor reached into the team, and the team is comprised of Kayla Norton, who's an Afrocentric specialist, and Andrea White. Now, it's a provincial team, so we cover all the offices across Nova Scotia. So once the reach-in is made, Andrea or Kayla will reach back and ask for a summary in terms of, what's the file is about. And then what they will do is provide the lens in terms of how you should, or how the worker should apply the lens in terms of culturally responsive services, what things that need to be considered, like the intergenerational family piece. There are many families across Nova Scotia who's looking after the seniors, but yet want to look after the child or somebody in the community. That is important. Also, what things you should be considered. This is a file that should be open, or are we able to put in prevention or early intervention? There might be services within the community-based, that could fill the need of the issue that was been brought forward. The recommendation is provided to the worker and the supervisor. They are to follow through, and if not, there needs to be a justification of why they didn't follow through on that recommendation. Maybe because there's a wait list, or a family has other services in place, so timing is not of that. The other thing that the team also provides, that we sit on several projects to ensure that the lens is applied, the Afrocentric lens is applied, and why it needs to be applied to all programs. In terms of the reach-in could be by community. We also have reach-in from family members, community organization who knows of a family or a youth that might require our service. And though that reach-in comes in through that particular community member or organization, we then ask for the consent of that family in order for us to request for a consult. After the reach-in is completed, we don't reach back to the community organization. It's up to the worker of the signed file to reach in to the family to say, this is what has been recommended. The reason for that is to build trust. And we know over the years that trust was a huge issue for the Department of Community Service, particularly in child and family well-being. With the Afrocentric team, we're seeing that trust coming forward. The goal is continue to keep that, the trust, and certainly build a better, stronger relationship with child and family well-being and the community, African Nova Scotian community, and people of African descent. It's so important that we be mindful of that, and the department does recognize that having the Afrocentric perspective certainly will give to the community and the department that brave and trusting relationship. And it's about building that relationship, providing the workers once they're involved with family, that it is important that race does matter, that being culturally responsive and attentive does matter, and how it's done, the Afrocentric lens is done, certainly will have better outcomes for the family and the youth that we serve. Since the creation of this team, workers, hearing back from workers, they're fully enlightened by once they know better, they're doing better. And certainly the practice framework they fall within the practice framework. So it's a short presentation. It is a busy team, a team of two, but certainly look forward in terms of building that team as we serve youth and family of African Nova Scotian people of African descent. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. Barb, were you jumping in?
I am.
Perfect.
So my name is Barb Ethwick, and I'm the coordinator of Children in Care. And I'm here to speak to you a little bit about the PATH program. Next slide. Sorry, Don. So before we get into the discussion about PATH, I wanted to share some of the information that has helped us to best consider how to best support young people leaving the care and support of child and family well-being. So despite Child and Family Wellbeing's ongoing efforts to find permanent loving families for children and youth, young people may leave permanent care and youth services at the age of majority, which is 19, without family support. And despite their circumstances and challenges, they will be faced with brand new adult responsibilities. So the research tells us that youth in care reaching adulthood experience worse outcomes than their peers. We know that poverty is a stressor that has a significant impact on the social determinants of health and contributes to poor overall health outcomes. Youth leaving care are vulnerable to experiencing poverty and homelessness. Mm-hmm. Canadian youth leaving care are found to be 200 times more likely to experience homelessness than that of their peers, mm-hmm, who are not in care. Many care leavers frequently are between being in emergency shelters, unhoused, transitional housing, or rented properties. It's also important to consider that today, young people are taking progressively longer to transition into adulthood. And Census Canada's data indicates that in 2021, 35.1% of young adults aged 20 to 34 are still living with at least one parent. And further to this, we have youth who are receiving care and supports from Child and Family Wellbeing. They often lose these supports when they reach the age of majority, which is 19 or 21 if their care status is extended, regardless of their readiness or their emotional or financial needs. So as we go through the coming next few slides, we will share how PATH will support, promote young people to have an increased ability focused on their personal, emotional, and life skills development with reduced financial pressures. Next slide, Dawn. So through Nova Scotia's 2023 Child Strategy, there was an expansion of the Child and Family Wellbeing Prevention and Early Intervention Program, along with an approval for an established financial program. It was supported to provide services and supports to youth who are transitioning to adulthood. So the objective of PATH, the PATH project, is to build a support system for youth to ensure that youth are safe, healthy, and have positive connections to their community, and as well to provide equitable opportunities to support the needs, to access to support needed to thrive and reach their fullest potential as they journey through adulthood. So there are three initiative pieces of PATH. So the first two are related to community-based supports for youth. So that's the Youth Outreach Resources and Youth Outreach Plus program. So there are 15 additional youth outreach workers positions provided to dedicate support to youth who are transitioning to adulthood. And for the Youth Outreach Program, there are 20 Youth Outreach Plus programs to be established, one per each Child and Family Wellbeing office across the province. And the Youth Outreach Program is actually the program that will be connected, or that is connected to the PATH program participants, and it's delivered by Family Services of Nova Scotia. And the third piece is the transitional supports for living costs. So an annual financial support, it will span for 6 years from the age of 19 to the day before the 25th birthday, decreasing each year as the youth continues to gain independence. The combined personal and financial support pieces are what makes up the program called PATH. So for the eligibility of PATH, so to be eligible for PATH, the applicant must be between the ages of 19 up until the day before their 25th birthday, reach the age of majority when their permanent care and custody order ends. So this means between either 19 or 21, 21 if the youth meets criteria for disability supports program, then their care status can be extended to that age. In addition to that, in addition to youth leaving permanent care, we also have youth who reach the age of majority while they're supported in a youth services agreement to live outside of their parent or guardian's home. They are also eligible. Along with youth services and permanent care, we also have our previous youth in care who are between the ages of 19 and 25 are also eligible for this program. So this means that any youth within this age range who previously reached the age of majority when their permanent care and custody order ended, or those who were supported by Child and Family Wellbeing's youth services agreement and reached the age of 19 while being supported outside of their parent or guardian's home are also eligible. So youth who may not be eligible are youth who did not have an active youth services agreement with Child and Family Wellbeing when they reach the age of majority, which is 19. Also, youth that would not be eligible are youth who remained living in their parents' home while they were being supported by a youth services agreement. along with youth who are in temporary care or youth who were in permanent care and adopted are not eligible for PATH. Next slide, Don. So with respect to payments, so all youth will receive a predetermined amount of funding annually that decreases by $2,000 to promote gradual independence. So the biweekly payments are issued automatically in advance of the 2-week service period, and reporting of the use of the funds is not required. So the youth are not required to say, I'm spending my money on rent or gas or transportation, school. The youth is able to spend this money where they see fit. Youth entering the program whose permanent care and custody order has previously ended at the age of majority will receive payments at the rate at which they are currently eligible. So if a youth is 21, they will receive the rate at which a 21-year-old would receive. Youth will be eligible for payments dating back to the program start date, regardless of when they enroll. So the program start date is January 1st, 2024. So if we have a youth who comes back who realizes in August 2024 that they're eligible for the program, they will receive a lump sum payment from January 1st to August based on their age. So they will receive that funding based on their age in a lump sum, and then their biweekly payments will continue after that. This path is also does not have to be reported to CRA. CRA has indicated that the funds are non-reportable and non-taxable, so there will be no tax slips issued. And given this position by CRA, PATH payments will not impact ESIA eligibility or other income tested supports. I want to just kind of put in a little note there that if a youth is receiving PATH and are supported by another income tested support, that they really should just check in to make sure that that this is not going to impact their program. So the next slide. So to be enrolled in PATH, the youth must enroll voluntarily, sign an agreement to access funds, provide some contact information, some demographic information, and banking information. So the youth must agree to Youth Outreach Plus program doing a check-in. So between the ages of 19 and 20, it's every 3 months, and 21 to 24, it's every 6 months. So PATH participants can check in with Youth Outreach Plus more often if they choose. This is a voluntary program, so they don't have to accept any of the other services that are provided by Youth Outreach. Probably would suggest that they do because it's a great program. But they do have to be agreeable to those check-ins. And there is a toll-free number at the top of the screen. So the toll-free number at the top of the screen is for Youth Outreach On-Call Support Line. And this is an additional support for youth who are receiving PATH, also youth who are part of the Youth Outreach Program, and Youth Outreach Plus participants. And this service is all provided through Family Services of Nova Scotia. I want to thank you for allowing me to have this time to present on PATH.
Thank you so much, Dawn, Anne, and Barb. I just wanted to confirm that you've concluded this sort of presentation portion, and just let folks know that if they did have any follow-up questions, they could drop those into the Q&A box, which you'll find along the bottom ribbon of options within the Zoom webinar. If folks were looking to find additional information about any of this online, would there be a particular spot that you would send them?
For PATH?
For PATH
Or for
the framework?
I'll speak to
Yeah.
the framework first, Barb, and I would also add to that our policy manual. So in the new year, there will be a website that can be accessed to be able to review the CFW or Child and Family Wellbeing policies, as well as the practice framework. So that is to come.
Mhm.
One question that came in via the Q&A just now was, would it be possible to have the slides available for those that would be interested in having them afterwards?
Absolutely, I can send those to you, Jeff.
Thanks very much. And I'll note to the person that asked, anybody else that's interested, please drop a question in Q&A and I can send those along.
And we do have little cards. I don't have any in the office, but they do have like a QR code that you can scan and get information on PATH. I could probably maybe locate some for you, Jeff, and send them out.
Perfect. Thank you. There's not a line up there in the Q&A box, so I'm not, let me just do a double check here. We'll give folks another moment or two. Seen a few others requesting the slides, so that's great. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today to share this important work. The intention of Nova Scotia Human Rights Week is to highlight just how many folks, both internal to government and across communities in Nova Scotia, are working in areas that touch upon human rights and sort of illustrating the fact that the work of the Human Rights Commission extends far beyond our offices and our team, but want to recognize all the great work that folks are doing to support greater inclusion across the board. And so highlighting this work, it came together really well. So I want to thank everyone once again. Any more cues? Oh, looks like a couple more are just popping in there. Work with youth. Speak to some of the key evaluation questions being asked for the PATH program. So maybe that would be over to you, Barb, in terms of evaluation of the PATH program.
So some of the key questions of the evaluation, or?
Yeah, I think that's what they were asking, some of the key evaluation questions.
Well, how will I answer that? So how we have been evaluating PATH, if I'm understanding what you're asking, is we have had a number of youth who've reached out to Family Services of Nova Scotia, which is part of Prevention and Early Intervention Program, sharing their stories about the impact that PATH, the positive impact that PATH has had on their lives. So we've been getting a lot of information with respect to that. So we've been, like, in terms of evaluating it, we are seeing that it has had a positive impact for the youth who are able to access it. I do know that we have not reached our the youth, all of the youth that we were hoping to reach. So we've really been trying to kind of put the plug for PATH out there in community, online, and really having youth kind of spread the word to other youth who may have been in care. So we do know that we haven't reached all of who we wanted to reach. So that's been taking some careful planning around how do we get the word out for youth, especially those youth. We're noticing that youth that will be turning 25 within this year are the youth that we're really trying to make contact with so that they can receive PATH.
Thanks very much, Barb, for taking that question on short notice, and I appreciate the opportunity that this presentation provides for folks to help spread the word and get more awareness of the program out there. And I'll let everybody know that the recording of this session will be made available on the Commission's website in the next day or so after we've downloaded the recording. So please check there and feel free to share it on. Once again, I just wanted to thank everybody for your time and for the work that you're doing, and encourage others who are on the meeting to check out the full calendar of events taking place during Nova Scotia Human Rights Week and sign up. Lots of great sessions throughout the next week and a bit. Thank you again to each of you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Great day.